You've probably heard that gifting £100,000 from your pension is a smart way to save 40% inheritance tax. But what if that move could actually cost your family £30,000, more than if you left the money in your pension and did nothing? Most people don't see this coming because the advice sounds solid on the surface. Gift it now. Beat the taxman. Protect the kids. But there's a number that gets left out of that conversation every single time. Every £1 you withdraw from your pension is subject to income tax the moment it leaves the fund. At basic rate, that's 20% gone straight away. So your £100,000 gift becomes £80,000 before your children have seen a penny of it. And the problem doesn't stop there. The £100,000 you withdrew is no longer growing inside the pension. Over 10 years at 5% a year, that money would have become £163,000. Even after a 40% inheritance tax charge, your family would receive £97,800. That's nearly £18,000 more than the £80,000 you gifted after tax today. The stake here isn't small. We're talking about up to £250,000 of unnecessary tax leakage for families who followed what looked like perfectly sensible advice. If you're a retiree with a decent pension pot and you want to avoid this trap, subscribe now, because in the next few minutes I'm going to walk you through the exact calculation that most advisors don't show you and what to do instead. Let me give you the full picture. You're a basic rate taxpayer. You take £100,000 from your pension to gift to your children. The moment that money leaves the fund, income tax kicks in. At 20%, HMRC takes £20,000. Your children receive £80,000. Now compare that to leaving the money untouched. At 5% annual growth over 10 years, £100,000 becomes £163,000. From April the 6th, 2027, unused pension funds will be included in your estate for inheritance tax purposes. So your family would face a 40% IHT charge on that £163,000, which leaves them with £97,800. That is still £17,800 more than the £80,000 you gifted after income tax. And this is the basic rate scenario where the income tax burden is as low as it gets. The chain of events that creates this problem is fairly straightforward. Someone receives advice to gift from their pension to avoid 40% inheritance tax. They withdraw the money, pay income tax on it now, hand the remainder to their children, and the pension pot stops growing. Then, from 2027, the remaining pension is in the estate anyway. So the core justification for the original advice, avoiding IHT, largely disappears for basic rate taxpayers, and the income tax cost was real and permanent. This isn't about being naive or making a foolish decision. The advice is common, it sounds logical, and nobody walks into this with bad intentions. The problem is that the income tax cost gets glossed over because it feels smaller than 40%. But once you factor in the lost growth, it isn't. Who tends to benefit from the standard advice? Sometimes the advisor who charges for a drawdown plan, and always the government which collects income tax today rather than waiting for IHT later. That doesn't make anyone a villain. It just means the incentives don't always point in the same direction as your family's interests. Now, what if you're a higher rate taxpayer? Then you pay 40% income tax on that withdrawal. Your £100,000 gift becomes £60,000 after tax, and the comparison shifts even further against gifting. But rather than just stacking up bad scenarios, let me show you a framework that tells you when gifting from your pension actually makes sense, and when it doesn't. The decision to gift from your pension shouldn't be a yes or no. It should follow a filter, a sequence that moves from the most tax-efficient source to the least. I used to recommend pension gifting without going through that sequence properly, and it took a conversation with a retired teacher to change my thinking. She was ready to withdraw a large sum from her pension, pay the income tax on it, and hand it to her son. After running the numbers, it was clear she'd be better off leaving the pension exactly where it was. That moment changed how I approach this entirely. Here's the filter. 3 steps in order. The first step is your 25% tax-free cash. You can withdraw up to 25% of your pension pot tax-free, up to a lifetime cap of £268,275. That is the most efficient money to gift. No income tax, no inheritance tax if you survive 7 years. If you have tax-free cash remaining and you want to pass money on, start there. The second step is your personal allowance. In the 2026 to 2027 tax year, you can receive up to £12,570 of income with no income tax due. If you're not already using your full allowance, you can withdraw that amount from your pension each year and pay nothing. Over 10 years, that's £125,700 gifted with 0 income tax. The third step, and only the third, is taxable drawdown. And even here you only proceed if your marginal income tax rate is genuinely lower than the effective inheritance tax rate your estate will pay. For most estates, the IHT rate is 40%, so you'd need to be withdrawing at a tax rate below that for it to make mathematical sense. To put numbers to it, if you withdraw £37,430 as a basic rate taxpayer, you pay 20% income tax. That's £7,486 lost immediately, leaving £29,944. If you'd left that £37,430 in your pension and it grew to £60,000 over 10 years, your family would receive £36,000 after a 40% IHT charge. Gifting now produces £29,944. Leaving it produces £36,000. The pension wins. The framework doesn't make the decision for you. It just stops you skipping to the expensive option before the cheaper ones are exhausted. And from 2027, understanding this order becomes even more important. To understand why the 2027 pension change matters so much, it helps to look at how we got here. The nil rate band, the threshold below which no inheritance tax is due, has been fixed at £325,000 since 2009. 17 years without an increase, while house prices have roughly doubled in that time and pension pots have grown considerably. The band has been frozen until at least 2031. So each year, more estates quietly cross the threshold and enter IHT territory without anyone doing anything differently. That frozen threshold already created a problem for a growing number of families. But in the autumn budget of 2024, the government announced a further change. From the 6th of April 2027, unused pension funds will be included in your estate for inheritance tax. This is the biggest shift in pension IHT rules in a generation. Before 2027, most defined contribution pension pots passed outside the estate entirely. That was a significant advantage. From 2027, that advantage disappears. HMRC estimates that around 10,500 additional estates will become liable for inheritance tax in 2027 and 2028 as a direct result of this change. A further 3,500 estates will see their IHT bill increase even though they were already paying some tax. If you're in your 60s with a pension worth £500,000, this isn't an abstract policy change. It directly affects the inheritance your family receives. And with less than 10 months until the rules take effect, the planning window is narrowing. The combination of a frozen nil rate band and a pension now inside the estate creates a very different calculation than the one most people have been working from. So what does it actually mean in practice for the two paths you could take from here? Let me put both paths side by side so you can see exactly where the difference comes from. In the first path, you withdraw £100,000 from your pension. At basic rate, income tax takes £20,000. You gift £80,000 to your children. The pension pot drops by £100,000, losing a decade of growth. If your children invest that £80,000 and it grows at 5% for 10 years, they end up with around £130,000. Meanwhile, any pension you have left is still in your estate from 2027 onwards. The gift helped, but the income tax bill was a permanent upfront loss. In the second path, you leave the £100,000 in the pension. It grows to £163,000 over 10 years. From April 2027, it's in your estate, and after a 40% IHT charge, your family receives £97,800. At the same time, you gift an equivalent sum from other sources, your ISA savings, or your tax-free cash where there's no income tax. That gifted amount also grows outside the estate. Your family ends up with £97,800 from the pension side, plus whatever the gift has become, and you never paid income tax on the pension withdrawal. The net result is that the second path typically leaves your family better off, and it leaves you with more flexibility. You haven't crystallized a tax liability you can't undo. That's the part worth thinking about carefully. When you gift from your pension and pay the income tax, that decision is final. The second path isn't. If your circumstances change, if you need the money, if a better option appears, if the rules change again, you still have choices. You haven't given anything away that you can't afford to. What happens to each path under pressure, though? If markets fall or care costs arrive unexpectedly, which one holds up? Two scenarios come up repeatedly when I talk to people about this, and both of them reveal how much the order of decisions matters. The first is a market downturn. Suppose you withdraw £100,000, pay the income tax, and gift £80,000 to your children. Shortly afterwards, markets fall 30%. That £80,000 gift is now worth £56,000. You paid £20,000 in income tax to deliver a gift that's lost a further £24,000 in value. And you can't get any of that back. The tax was collected the moment the money left the pension. In the second path, if markets fall while the money is still inside the pension, the loss is real, but you haven't crystallized it. You can wait for a recovery. You haven't locked in the downside with a permanent tax cost on top. The second scenario is care costs. Average residential care home fees in the UK run at roughly £50,000 to £60,000 per year. A £100,000 pension pot covers less than 2 years of that. If you've already gifted £80,000 out of your pension, you've reduced the resource you'd need to fund care. There's a further risk here too. If a local authority assesses your finances for care funding, a large gift made deliberately to reduce your assets can be treated as a deliberate deprivation. That means the local authority may count it as still belonging to you when working out what you have to contribute. In the second path, your pension remains accessible. You can use it for care without that kind of complication. Neither of these scenarios means you should never gift money. They just show that the order and the source of the gift has real consequences. So if gifting directly from the pension is often the wrong move, what's the right one? So what does the right approach actually look like? There are 4 steps, and the order matters. Step 1 is your tax-free cash. When you access your pension, you're entitled to withdraw up to 25% of the pot, completely free of income tax, subject to a lifetime cap of £268,275. This is the most efficient money you have for gifting. No income tax on the way out. No inheritance tax if you survive 7 years after the gift. If you have tax-free cash remaining and you want to reduce your estate, start here every time. It's the cleanest option available. Step 2 is your ISA savings. Money held in an ISA has already been taxed on the way in. Withdrawals are tax-free. If you have savings in an ISA and you want to pass money to your family, those funds carry no income tax cost when you take them out and gift them. Gift from the ISA before you ever consider touching your pension drawdown. Step 3 is your personal allowance. In the current tax year, you can receive £12,570 of income before income tax applies. If your other income, state pension, rental income, part-time work, leaves some of that allowance unused, you can withdraw money from your pension to fill it and pay no income tax. Over 10 years, that's £125,700 out of your pension with 0 income tax cost. It's a slower approach, but the maths work in your favour. Step 4 is life insurance written in trust. If you've worked through steps 1 to 3 and there's still a meaningful inheritance tax liability remaining, a whole-of-life policy held in a trust can cover the bill. The payout doesn't form part of your estate, so it reaches your family tax-free. As a rough guide, a £200,000 policy at age 60 might cost somewhere around £100 to £200 per month, depending on your health, but the precise cost depends on your individual circumstances. I had a client, a retired engineer, who was on the verge of withdrawing £50,000 from his pension as a gift to his daughter. After going through these steps, it turned out most of his tax-free cash was still intact. He used that instead, no income tax, same outcome for his daughter. He saved £10,000 in tax that he'd otherwise have handed to HMRC. That's not a theoretical saving, that's a real one. Even with a clear plan in place, though, most people still hesitate. There's a psychological layer to this that's worth understanding before you decide what to do. There's a reason this trap catches so many careful, well-informed people. The thought of HMRC taking 40% of your pension after you die produces a strong reaction. It feels like a large and avoidable loss, and when something feels large and avoidable, the impulse is to act immediately to prevent it. But loss aversion works in both directions. The 40% IHT charge is visible and named. The 20% income tax you pay today on a pension withdrawal feels smaller. It's a lower percentage. What's harder to see is that the income tax is certain and immediate, while the IHT charge is uncertain, years away, and only applies to what remains. By the time you've factored in the growth your pension loses and the income tax you've paid, the certain smaller loss can outweigh the uncertain larger one. This doesn't mean your instinct to protect your family is wrong. It's a reasonable response to a real situation. But the question driving the decision often needs adjusting. Most people start from a position of asking how to avoid inheritance tax. A more useful question is, what is the most tax-efficient source of money to gift right now? Framed that way, the answer almost always starts with tax-free cash, moves to ISA savings, runs through your personal allowance, and only considers taxable pension drawdown as a last resort, and only then if the arithmetic genuinely supports it. That shift in framing doesn't require a different goal. It just uses a cleaner route to get there. So let me pull this together and give you a clear summary of where this leaves you. The hidden income tax trap is real, and it catches people precisely because the advice that leads to it sounds sensible. Gift from your pension, avoid the 40% IHT charge. But the income tax you pay on the withdrawal and the growth your pension loses can leave your family with less than if you'd done nothing. The better approach: use your tax-free cash first, then your ISA savings, then your personal allowance. Only consider taxable drawdown if the numbers genuinely support it, and run a 10-year growth assumption before you do. If this kind of retirement planning is useful to you, subscribe now. I'll be covering the 2027 pension changes in detail in the next video. It's the single biggest rule change affecting pension savers in years, and the planning window is closing.